Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we're going to do something really important. We are completely dismantling the fear that surrounds a specific, heavily misunderstood astrological placement, Saturn in the 8th house. Now, if you've spent any time looking into this, digging through old forums or traditional astrology texts, you know it can sound, frankly, incredibly intimidating. It gets painted as this cosmic boogeyman, but actually, scratch that. I want you to think of Saturn not as a punisher, but as the strictest, most demanding personal trainer you've ever had. Yes, the workouts are going to be brutal, and yeah, you might want to quit, but the results? Absolutely undeniable. We're going to see how this placement is actually a master blueprint for building literally unshakable inner strength. Let's jump right in.
So to get started, let's just confront the absolute biggest misconception head-on. The idea here is not doom. It's not some impending disaster, despite what those overly dramatic interpretations might tell you. When we clear away all the superstition, what we're actually looking at is a slow, methodical, architectural process of building resilience, and it happens through really intense life lessons. It's exactly like laying down brick after brick. When you're right in the middle of it, you're just staring at a pile of heavy bricks, sweating, and wondering why everything feels like such hard work. But what you don't realize in the moment is that you are building a fortress. This kind of resilience, it's not something you're just born with. It's something you construct, brick by brick, through lived experience.
So, Section 1, Reframing the 8th House. At first glance, this placement usually shows up as a deep, almost paralyzing fear of change, of endings, and of transformation itself. And psychologically, that makes perfect sense. Think about it. Saturn is the planet of structure, stability, and permanence. It desperately wants things to stay the exact same. But the 8th house? That's the house of constant transformation, death, and rebirth. It demands evolution. So, naturally, when you drop the planet of permanence into the house of change, you get a massive amount of tension. You might find yourself fighting endings tooth and nail, holding on to relationships or jobs or just phases of life way past their expiration date, simply because the transition feels terrifying. But here is the absolutely crucial takeaway. That very tension, it acts as your foundational framework. Because you take these shifts so incredibly seriously, you eventually become profoundly capable. You never take transitions lightly, which means when you do finally navigate them, you do it with a level of thoroughness and sheer strength that is just unmatched.
All right, moving on to part 2, early fears and suppressed instincts.
Looking back at your youth, you might have experienced some pretty major hesitation when it came to trusting others or opening up fully. People might have even called you closed off, secretive, or maybe a little guarded. But listen, this isn't just you being difficult or intentionally cold, not at all. It stems directly from a deeply rooted, highly protective fear of loss. Or maybe it's a fear of losing control over your environment and your own intense emotions. See, you realize really early on that the 8th house domains, things like intimacy, shared resources, deep psychological vulnerability, those are the soft underbelly of the human experience. Getting hurt there doesn't just sting, it destroys. So as a pure survival tactic, you wrap your emotional core in this really thick protective layer. You end up suppressing those natural instincts just to make absolutely sure you don't hand the wrong person the power to dismantle your life.
Now watch how your intuition actually evolves over time under this heavy protective placement, because it's a genuinely fascinating journey. You basically start at step 1, which is intensely doubting your own instincts. You know the feeling. You might get this strong gut feeling about someone's ulterior motives, but then you just talk yourself out of it. You feel unsure. Then you step into phase 2. This is where you begin slowly, very cautiously, testing your boundaries and your judgment out in the real world. You might let someone in just a tiny bit, observe their behavior and see if it actually aligns with your gut feeling. And then over years of doing this, you finally hit step 3, razor-sharp psychological insight. And I really want you to understand why this matters. Your intuition isn't just some sudden, unearned flash of mystical brilliance, right? It's a meticulously calibrated, field-tested instrument. It becomes extremely reliable for the exact reason that you forced it to prove itself over and over again.
You're probably noticing a really powerful theme of delayed emotional processing as this journey unfolds. Early on in life, your focus is entirely on suppressing fear and maintaining this remarkably strong emotional control. You're basically white-knuckling your way through crises. You're the one holding it all together for your family or your friends, all while internalizing every ounce of that anxiety. It's literally like a pressure cooker. But as you transition into later life, the architecture is finally strong enough to handle all that steam. You learn how to deeply process that fear. You finally get to experience a genuine, profound emotional release. The emotional control, that was absolutely mandatory from the start, just to survive. But the true emotional release?
Well, that simply takes time, maturity, and a truly safe environment to fully develop.
Which brings us to Section 3, the crucible of intense pressures.
Okay, so your trust is earned slowly, and it gets tested repeatedly across three very specific, really high-stakes arenas that kind of define the middle years of your life. First up, shared finances. And we're not just talking about who pays for dinner here. This is about taxes, inheritances, joint assets, the big stuff. You'll likely show serious financial caution because you know that marrying into debt or signing the wrong contract has massive real-world consequences. Second, we've got karmic partnerships. You're going to find that your intimate relationships are rarely just casual. They carry this really heavy emotional weight, and they often feel like profound life lessons or bring this deep sense of responsibility. And finally, emotional boundaries. You'll routinely attract people and situations that actively challenge your boundaries and push your judgment to its absolute limits. And honestly, these aren't accidents. These are the specific gyms where your emotional muscles are actively being built.
I really want you to absorb the truth of this idea, because it pretty much holds the key to understanding this entire placement. You don't learn calmness from theory, you learn it from surviving intensity. Your profound emotional resilience isn't something you can just read about in a self-help book, do a little weekend workshop on, and then suddenly possess. No way. It is built exclusively through repeatedly surviving those intense, high-pressure situations we were just talking about. When the sky falls, you don't panic. Why? Because you've already mentally rehearsed the disaster 1,000 times over. You literally earn your calm straight through the fire of lived experience.
Let's look at Part 4, Delayed Mastery and Inner Strength.
So this brings us to what I like to call the heroic arc of this placement. When we actually map this out, the trajectory is just incredibly inspiring. You start out in youth with this deep hesitation to trust, completely terrified of what might happen if you let go of the reins. Then you push through midlife, enduring all those repeated pressure situations and, taking your hits. But then look where it culminates later in life. You become exceptionally skilled at managing crises. You make this amazing transition from the scared individual just protecting themselves to the solid anchor protecting everyone else around them. When everyone else is totally panicking during an emotional, financial, or psychological emergency, you are the one with a steady hand, clearly and calmly guiding them right through the wreckage. You effectively become the designated driver for life's biggest crises.
Ultimately, your deepest, most impenetrable strength comes directly from confronting the exact things that society at large completely avoids. Because of this grueling journey you've been on, you develop a totally unique capacity to handle taboo subjects. I'm talking about things like death, profound trauma, deep psychological motives, and insanely complex financial entanglements. You handle these hidden realities with a level of maturity that can frankly just stun other people. And you might be wondering, why does this even matter? What is the point of all this heavy lifting? Well, it's because the world desperately relies on people who do not flinch in the face of the dark or the difficult. Society needs people who can look straight into the shadows without blinking. And that is exactly who you become.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this question to really reflect on. What hidden reality are you finally ready to confront? Because whether you realize it at the time or not, every single challenge you faced, every boundary that got tested, and every intense lesson you had to endure, it was all simply providing the raw materials for the magnificent psychological fortress you've been building your entire life. Embrace that strength. It is entirely 100% yours. Thanks so much for exploring this with me today.